Say it all with me, folks. Okay, I can't do it. I can't do the Steve Dangle. I don't want to really torture my vocal cords and strain everything for the next few hours because it's trade deadline day. Of course, we have to make videos. So I can't, unfortunately, scream at the top of my lungs a la Steve Dangle. Of course, big respect to Steve and all the work that he does, though, because the Toronto Maple Leafs have done themselves a move. Brad Treliving finally getting involved here after weeks worth of speculating that the Toronto Maple Leafs would be after a potential center like Yanni Gourde, for example. Maybe a Braden Shen. A whole bunch of other names have been tossed out there as potential Toronto Maple Leafs targets, but ever since that Gourde trade a few days ago, I was sensing a little bit of panic in the Leafs fan base. Sure, a lot of that had to have come from Steve Dangle himself, in particular the Brad tweets and the video, but the Leafs finally have their guy. Take a look at this. It's a pretty small trade, all things considered, only 3 assets getting swapped around here, but it is Scott Laughton over to the Toronto Maple Leafs in exchange for a conditional 2026 first-round pick and prospect Nikita Grebenkin. Now, let's dive into this trade. I don't know if it's going to take too long, but this will be a normal-sized video. Scott Laughton is 30 years old, contract expires next season, making $3 million a year, 6'1", 190, left-handed center left wing. And this season, Laughton has 27 points in 67 games. The year before that, he had 39 points in 82 games, and the year before that, he had 43 points in 78 games played. Ever since Scott Laughton was drafted by the Philadelphia Flyers in the 2012 NHL Draft as a first-round pick, he has been a decent to pretty all-right player in Philly. A lot more physical and plays with a bit more pace than you would expect out of a first-round prospect, but he eventually did find himself a home in the middle six of the Philadelphia Flyers, scoring some points and doing some pretty good things. I mean, he's kind of a fantasy darling. If you're in a bangers league, Scott Laughton will bring a lot of value there. I'm not necessarily sure if his point production is going to translate over to Toronto just due to ice time and due to whomever else the Leafs have on their team compared to Philadelphia. But Scott Laughton this season was one of the more notable Flyers when it comes to overall point production. Top 10 in scoring, right there in the thick of it with realistically a chance of being a top 5 scorer on this team. I mean, Forster, Brink, Cates, Laughton, Sanheim, all separated by just 2 points on the season. Sean Couturier as well. If Scott Laughton gets a 3-point game, all of a sudden he's 4th overall on the team in points. So that kind of indicates where Laughton's point production lies, relevant to the rest of the Philadelphia Flyers scoring core. So I'm not necessarily too sure if that's going to translate 1-to-1 in Toronto, per se, but as a potential third-line center, a guy playing in a more meaningful role with the Leafs compared to, let's say, what he would have been offered elsewhere, this, of course, is a reasonably good add for Brad and his squad. Now, if we head over to the Leafs and their line combinations, this is what Daily Faceoff projects everything to look like. Scott Laughton on the third line with Bobby McMann, who has had his really good moments throughout the season, and Max Domi. Domi, of course, very nice playmaker over there. You have everybody else laid out over here too. Matthew Nyes, Matthews, Marner. Are you grateful, Toronto Maple Leafs fans, that Brad did not give up Matthew Nyes for Mikko Rantanen? I mean, that was an entire conversation that everybody was panicking about last night, but Matthew Nyes seems like he's sticking around. The Leafs end up getting Scott Laughton, and it does not cost them anybody on their immediate roster. So let's talk about what it did cost the Maple Leafs. Firstly, conditional first-round pick. Yeah, we knew the Leafs were going to part with that. They were not going to keep around any significant draft capital heading into this trade deadline season, and what could essentially be the last dance for this core if things don't go well in the 2025 playoffs. But Nikita Grebenkin is a really interesting prospect. 21 years old, 6'2", 209, left-handed winger, drafted by the Maple Leafs in the 5th round of the 2022 NHL Draft, 135th overall. Grebenkin had himself a pretty interesting stint with the Metallurg Magnitogorsk team in the KHL last season, 41 points in 67 games played as a 20-year-old. That is definitely not bad. I'd go as far to say that that's actually pretty good. Really good, even. Just under a point per game in your 20s in the KHL obviously is a great sign, and this season he had 7 games played with the regular Toronto Maple Leafs scoring 0 points, but that's not really all too deterrent for what he's going to be able to do. He's really young after all. He had 21 points in 39 Toronto Marlies games this season, so that's a lot of value out of a 5th round pick. Realistically, if you think about Grebenkin, and you map it out as, oh, the Maple Leafs traded away a 1st round pick and a 5th round pick for Scott Laughton. Honestly, that looks really good. It's just the fact that Grebenkin was a really good pickup in that 5th round, 135th overall by Toronto a few years ago, that you could be looking at this trade as a lot more of a win for Philadelphia. Yes, that 1st round pick is great, but Grebenkin is giving really good value here as a 5th round prospect, a lot more than a normal 5th rounder would usually give you. So from the MHL production to the KHL production last season to the AHL production this season, this is a really underrated ad for a Philadelphia team that's been looking to add on extra prospects and depth in their young system. Ultimately, with the trade of Andrei Kuzmenko, you have a Russian going out and another Russian coming in, with Scott Laughton being the mediator there. Ultimately, this does help out the Philadelphia Flyers in terms of what they're trying to do, the conversations they're trying to have about getting younger. Imagine if you have Grebenkin and Mishkov together, that's a Russian connection that we can rebuild, rather than that Kuzmenko connection, which only lasted 7 games in Philadelphia because they're a seller and they didn't want to let this guy walk for nothing. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this trade right here. Scott Laughton over to Toronto for a conditional 1st and Nikita Grebenkin. If you take a look at this tweet by Bench Rates, a 1st round pick seemed like too high a price a couple of days ago for Scott Laughton, but Nikita Grebenkin is a very good prospect over here. Is this saying that Grebenkin projects as an AHL regular? Are you saying that the Leafs gave up too much, including him? No, it's just that this card is only based on the data he has in the AHL. There's nothing interesting about his NHL profile just yet. Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, he has 0 points in 7 games, but he's 21 years old, so it's kind of okay. Who wins this trade? Honestly, I'm going to go with the Flyers. I think they got a lot for Scott Laughton. A lot for Laughton. I love that. Scott Laughton. It helps that the Scott has the same assonance as the Laughton does. Scott Laughton. A lot for Scott Laughton. Let's go out there and say the Flyers, they ended up taking the dub here. Overpay, typical Leafs L, holy overpay. Plan the parade. Look, guys, I don't think that this is that bad for Toronto. I think they gave up the price that they kind of needed to. We saw Tampa Bay lock and load with Oliver Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gordon. That was the standard that was set, man. It's a seller's market. Tampa Bay was like, hey, we want those guys, so we're going to give 2 first-round picks, a whole bunch of stuff, and Leafs fans are like, okay, wait a minute, they got Yanni Gord for that? Okay, of course they did. They traded so much to get him. Now, Brad Treliving is going to have to pay a lot to get a guy, and that's exactly what they did here, a first-round pick and Grebenkin. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about Scott Laughton heading over to the Toronto Maple Leafs, and whether or not the Leafs overpaid to get this guy onto their squad. Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know in the comments. What do you think? I hope you enjoyed this video. Zayne, and bye.